a GIS planner for Lee County in the Department of Community Development, where I basically did anything that related to planning, zoning, stuff like that. And then prior to that, I did research on eelgrass using drone mapping in my undergraduate studies. So, all right, so yeah, my name is Hunter Searson with Pennoni Associates. I'm an environmental scientist, and I'm going to be presenting about GIS for environmental permitting. There we go. Okay, so what do we do? So my office is based in Cape Coral, and we are a solely environmental consulting office. And so basically our projects can range anywhere from a size of quarter-acre residential lots to larger multi-hundred, 1,000-acre properties. It just depends on our clients' needs. And then we perform environmental assessments to establish flux categories, and anything else that goes along with an environmental assessment that we need to look for, like protected species, heritage trees, you know, anything like that. And along with that goes wetland delineation. So we perform wetland delineations and wetland flagging to establish the boundary of wetlands on properties. We perform protected species surveys, and I just listed out some common protected species in Southwest Florida that we survey for: gopher tortoises, burrowing owls, bonneted bats, fox squirrels, scrub jays, and bald eagles. And today I'm going to be talking more specifically about FWC permitting for the gopher tortoises and the burrowing owls, as well as for our general environmental assessments. We perform environmental compliance on ongoing construction projects, and we perform mitigation and permitted protected species excavation and relocation. So basically what that means is we will perform a supervised backhoe excavation of gopher tortoise burrows. We'll relocate them to qualified recipient sites and so on. So, okay. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to start with collecting data in the field. So sometimes before we collect data in the field using field maps, I will perform some georeferencing to overlay maybe a site plan or a prior, some kind of prior field map that was created for the site. Like if there's a wetland impact map or something like that, I might overlay it onto, I might georeference it and then overlay it in our field maps into a web map that we use. So where do we get our data? While some of it is self-produced, and I'll talk about those layers on the right, that are some examples of feature layers that we use when collecting this information. A lot of it is sourced from open source public entities, like state and federal agencies, FWC, USGS. I use FGDL for some stuff to look for quality data. South Florida Water Management District. So that list on the right is just an example of some points, lines, and polygons that we use when we're doing a environmental assessment. We have species type that we can identify if there's an eagle nest, active, inactive, or abandoned burrows, potentially occupied burrowing owl, armadillo, or any other species. Heritage trees, which are trees that have a specific diameter breast height that we need to identify, and counties like Charlotte County, Sarasota County have certain requirements for those. Miscellaneous points is basically, you can see some on the left there, any like note taking we need to make when we're conducting a flux mapping or anything like that, where we might set a point and be like, okay, this is this area, this is the northern extent of this plant community or flux category that we've determined based on plant community and other aspects, other factors. Soil pits, wetland points, as you can see on the left, that's a project we're doing some wetland flagging on. Each point I created there has a label that shows up when you're in field maps, wetland delineation line work, and then I have some LiDAR. That's really the only raster data we use is LiDAR data from the Water Management District. It's not like the keynote presentation was really a really great example of good LiDAR. That we don't use elevation as a factor for determining a wetland. you know, there are a lot of reasons for that, but one is that this LiDAR is not super accurate. You can tell because when you zoom in and out, it changes, and that's not always good. So, yep, ArcGIS Pro for environmental assessment reports. So when we conduct an environmental assessment, we collect field observations. We take them back to the office. We write a report for our client, as well as to provide to state and federal agencies like the FWC or the Water Management District, or whoever might need to see that for permitting purposes. And we attach a certain list of maps with those reports to help help the reviewer visually understand the report. And so this is an example of a classic set of maps that we would typically use: a location map, aerials, soils, flux, wetland location map, USGS. Quad map is basically just a topographic base map. Protected species survey with points and transects of where we walk on the property. This is an example of a property in Bartow that we surveyed this past year. And you can see there's a table with all the flux codes on there with acreages, federal and state statuses, things that our reviewers need to know when they're reviewing the permit. Okay, so that's that. Next, when we perform a backhoe excavation and a relocation of a gopher tortoise, we are required to submit an FWC permit. So with that permit, we attach two maps, really simple maps. One is just showing the locations with coordinates and transect lines of where we walked on the property to survey for the protected species. That's on the left there. This one on the right is just one showing soils and land use codes for that same property. Okay, and finally, field conditions can change drastically. We might visit a site 6 months intervals in between. So like, we might not visit a site, you know, for 6 months or 3 months or however long it may be. Vegetation can grow or change. It can decrease. Burrows can become inactive or abandoned. Animals might migrate to an adjacent property or somewhere else. So erosion can happen if you're on a coastline, you know, or somewhere where there's a body of water. If you're looking at a wetland area, it looks very different between wet and dry season. And I found that, you know, especially with the overgrowth, like in this picture over to the right, if that was just ground cover when we went out to survey it, you know, 6 months ago, we go out there and mark a gopher tortoise point. Okay, well, that's 15 to 20 foot accuracy. So we have to walk around and maybe look in like a 30-foot radius for each burrow, and especially if it's abandoned or inactive, it's even harder to find. So for efficiency's sake, it helps a lot to really narrow down on the spatial accuracy. So we use the Battle Flex Mini as our GPS receiver, and it really cuts the accuracy down to like 5 to 6.5 feet, depending on, you know, where satellites are, what the coverage is, and stuff like that. All right, and that is it. Thank you guys for listening. And if anybody has any questions, let me know. Yes.
For your environmental permitting report, are you seeing if there's anybody who is starting to move more towards like web maps themselves, or like being able to have them? I know when I was working in an agency as well, it was mostly just paper maps, but I wasn't sure if different consulting firms are looking also at like web apps themselves.
Good question. Yeah, I'm not sure about other consulting firms. State agencies, I haven't seen them move into web mapping for permitting purposes, really, unless it's to look like the Water Management District has an e-permitting website where you can check, you know, permits on wetland permits on there and things like that. But they always request static maps. Yes.
Their data sets and prove that those data sets are accurate for your client.
Can you think of an example?
Like, you know, they have some, they may have people's nest locations,
yeah.
They may have those data already. And I know, like, for some of the FUT projects where, you know, they're starting to ask us to use their data. I'm just curious if you're starting to see that
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I know that one instance I can think of is Eagle Nest. For instance, like Audubon has a well-known eagle viewer map that they have online, and we typically will pull data from that, as well as what we establish in the field. We don't typically share our data interchangeably. If they ask, we would, but Lee County also has their own eagles nest layer, so I haven't had them request that from us, so, yeah. Anybody else?